Some of the primal cultures people mentioned were actually those tribes that I spent time with. There are radiologists that are on the other side of the fence.
Right, but I think we actually stopped being allowed to have milk on our cereal because we were afraid that the cows were radioactive. Hey, Peter, welcome back.
Hey, David, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Call Me Data.
Yes, absolutely. We have a lot to do today.
As always.
Let's start with a little bit of current events. I know that there were a couple of articles that caught your interest this week, so let's talk about those.
There were always a couple of articles that catch my interest, and I think we could probably do a week's worth of podcasts just on recent articles. But I think what's been fairly prominent in the news lately is the sky is falling. Did you know the sky was falling? I wasn't aware the sky was falling.
I hadn't noticed, but...
I know, but you know what? Look, if it bleeds, it leads. So, of course, every newspaper on the planet is proposing that, AI is going to collapse.
Oh, this is the AI bubble story that won't go away, right?
Oh, it's been going on for the last 6 months. It's going to collapse. So, of course, the Wall Street Journal put an article on the front cover from, quoting J.P. Morgan that there has to be roughly $650 billion in AI spend for there to be a 10% return on the AI companies. So that's a lot of money that needs to be spent. So I think, for instance, take an average Netflix subscriber would have to spend roughly $140 per subscriber to cover some of this spend.
Wow.
And then went through a list of companies and how much you would presumably have to spend, how much of that would get passed on to the consumer in order for that number to be hit. I think the argument here is, of course, the infrastructure costs are astronomical, and going forward, there will be trillions of dollars in additional costs that are required to make this,
It sounds like they're making these bets on infrastructure, hoping that the market is there someday and hoping there's a path to recoup that investment. I was also reading the article, and they were talking specifically, too, about some of the data centers being constructed.
Right.
And saying, like, if it was just the people using AI today and they needed to fund the construction of all these new data centers, they would have to, I think it was like more than quadruple the price of access to the models and tools that we have today. So obviously, I don't think anyone's looking forward to paying $80 or $100 for the basic tier of access to a language model. Right. So hopefully that turns out that more people will be using it. And more business.
I think you're seeing the market is slowly, it's rapidly starting to change. Right. I think a lot of that hardware is necessary for pre-training and training the models, but that's going to come to an end, I think, in a couple of years. And you're going to start to see the transition to more inference costs, and that's going to be a big switch.
So the question I have, and I know we're not going to be able to answer this because we're not fortune tellers, but some people far smarter than us have been looking at, inferencing specific hardware. And so all these data centers are being built full of GPUs. And to your point, I think we'll see a much more rapid growth in inferencing than in model training. And so what happens to all those GPUs if we come out with better, more efficient inferencing chips? Is that all going to be wasted?
No, I think a lot of those NVIDIA cards will just be obsolete at some point. Look, reality is pre-training is not going away. Right. Whether it will occur on a scale that it's occurring, probably not, only because they've consumed so much of the data that's readily available so far. I think it'll change. I think also NVIDIA is releasing a new card that I think is 30x faster on inferencing than the previous generation. Wow. And there's also a bunch of third-party hardware companies out there that really focus on inferencing alone and have and they don't do training at all. These chips don't do training, but they just focus on inferencing and making sure you maximize inferencing.
Okay.
Then there's also the argument, of course, that all these models are going to go away and there's going to be a new class in architecture that it's going to make it dramatically different.
Could happen.
Totally plausible.
Entirely plausible. Well, the good news, I think, for a lot of these companies is that they aren't assuming that they have a long window to amortize these investments anyway. I think most of the hyperscalers usually in 2 to 3 years, they have capitalized all their hardware investments. Right. So as long as that new breakthrough that makes transformer architectures and large language models obsolete doesn't happen in the next 2 years, they'll probably be okay. They're
okay. And another piece of information we're going to pivot once, which I found absolutely fascinating, the U.S. government is backing the restarting of 3 Mile Island. So they're ponying up $1.7 billion to restart, of which all the electricity so they think they're going to restart 2 out of the 3 reactors, one which had a partial meltdown, and I think it was in the 80s. So they're going to restart those other 2. All the electricity from those reactors is actually going to Microsoft.
Yes. To run data centers.
To run data centers for this,
AI.
yes. So 100% of the electricity generated is going to go, which is fine because it'll take it off the grid as it is today. It'll give them some pain relief from.
I didn't know we were going to talk about that, and I just had like a flashback. I literally remember being a kid when 3 Mile Island happened, and I was living in northern Pennsylvania, just a couple hours north of where that was. And I'm not sure if this is just my memory playing tricks on me, but I think we actually stopped being allowed to have milk on our cereal because we were afraid that the cows were radioactive. I mean,
they went a little crazy back. They didn't know what to make about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't as serious as the news made it out at the time. I mean, yes, there was I think some gases were released, but there was never any major radioactive release from 3 Mile Island. It was more paranoid at the time.
Well, on to current events. We have something really interesting, I think, that we're going to do. So we are going to wrap up the year by doing an Ask Me Anything style episode of the podcast. So anybody who wants to ask us a question or wants to give us a topic to debate or wants to make a controversial statement and see if we can react to it, whatever you have on your mind that you'd like us to address, send us an email. You can send it to podcast@allinondata.com, or you can put it in the comments on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be collecting those over the next few weeks, and we're going to do our best to answer questions.
Yeah, and please, nothing's too crazy. So please, the more the better.
Yeah, nothing personal though. Just AI and data related would be good. You can't ask me about my hair care regime or anything like that.
I can ask about your Hawaiian shirts.
You can ask about the Hawaiian shirts. They're fair game.
Yes, they are. They are. And I think that would be a good service to those that provide you with the Hawaiian shirts.
All right. So we are very fortunate today that it's not just you and I sitting in the studio. We have a guest.
We have a guest,
the man of mystery who's been sitting to my left for a few moments now. We're really, really happy to have Dr. Kavin Mistry here with us. So Kavin, welcome to the podcast.
So I specialize in brain and spine imaging, and pretty much, people come into the hospital for strokes and brain tumors and all of that. So we cover all of that. Basically, from the imaging aspect,
Very cool. So you may be wondering why we have a neurologist here, or I'm sorry, a neuroradiologist here with us today. We're going to talk about some really interesting overlap between health and AI, and both how AI is being used in your field, but also some interesting thoughts that you've shared with us on that overlap between AI and human performance. So very much looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we go too far, though, Peter and I both were lucky enough to read your book. So Dr. Kavin published a book earlier this year, I think it was, right?
Primal Health Design.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's been it's been a passion of mine, and it was a pleasure getting it on paper finally. And
I'm sure
it's just I think it's resonating with the audience really well.
So I want to maybe start by talking a little bit about that. We both read it.
We both read the book, and it was an excellent book. I would actually highly recommend it. I actually found it fascinating. I think one thing I wanted you to go on a little bit more is you have a fascinating background. Like when I read about your background and I heard about it, I was utterly enthralled. So I think part of all of this is understanding your journey and how you got here. And I think it just gives that context, which I thought was super important.
Yeah, Peter, it's interesting. As we get so much enamored by technology these days, right? We have to sometimes step back and really look at who we are at the essence or the core of who we are, or our primal self, as I call it. And it was interesting. I started radiology, and the first day I go in as a radiology resident, right? And they started putting up these films, and I look at these spines, and these are 30, 40-year-olds and whose spines look like they're, 50, 60, 70-year-olds. And I said, isn't this amazing? Because, you always study normal anatomy.
Right.
All of a sudden, you look at abnormal anatomy, and I go, wow. I mean, I said, like, people are aging faster than they should. Their bodies are aging faster than their chronological age.
Right.
And I said, is this the norm? And so people, my senior residents would say, just read the damn film, right? Like don't pay attention to that. Like who cares about that? But it stuck with me, and I carried that. And then as I went forward, what was interesting is when I saw 70, 80-year-olds whose bodies look like they were 30, 40-year-old.
Right.
And then that begged the question. I said, what is, how come this exception cannot be the norm.
Right.
Is this something that this guy is doing that others are not doing? And to bring back to the origin story, so it led me back and said that what are, how are we aging, in our sense, how are people aging? And it took me, made me step back into where I came from. And, I grew up, my dad was with the United Nations. That means we traveled all over the world. I've changed 22 houses.
Wow.
I've lived in Africa for 5 years, from age 5 to 10. I lived with African tribes because a lot of his work involved that. Spent time there. At that time, I wasn't doing research, right? But when I went back and I said, and I started looking into longevity research and said, what are these 70, 80-year-olds doing to stay healthy? It took me back into the blue zones. It took me back to primal cultures.
Right.
And some of the primal cultures people mentioned were actually those tribes that I spent time with. Particularly, there's one tribe called the Hadzabe, which I spent time with as a child. I hung out with the Hadza kids and did everything, chased, lit things on fire and ate bugs and dug up tubers and things like that. All fun things. But now that I look at that, it gave me a lot of insight when I connected the dots. And so what I started doing was I started putting things into buckets. And I said, okay, what are things that are making us thrive? And actually, what are things that are taking health away from us? And it amounted to 7 key buckets, or 7 key primal connections. Hence, the book is 7 key paradigms to reverse your biological age. So
very neat. And one of the things you were telling us the other day, which I think is fascinating, is sort of the I'll say the traditional occupation of some of your ancestors, which has a link to your name as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, sure, yes. So Mistry, it means expert woodworker. So I come from a lineage of expert woodworkers. And I tell people, even though I don't deal with wood, but I still deal with the design. And I love designing models that actually can further how we treat health. Right. And that's why I call the book Primal Health Design. And it was just paying tribute to that design aspect, because I think that getting this insight from what makes us thrive can help us design models that are actually going to be more proactive. Medicine right now is very reactive.
Right.
You get a heart attack, you come in, we treat you, but nobody says proactively, let's design so we don't get the heart attack in the first place. Right.
Interesting. Well, I felt very validated personally by a few parts of the book. Mostly it helps me defend my need to go out into the woods and walk around sometimes to think and to clear my head. So I thought it was interesting that was actually, exposure to nature was actually one of the key principles that you talked about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's maybe talk a little bit about where you're seeing AI in the medical field. And I know that you've been working with some AI tools at work, and tell us a little bit about what you see when you go into work every day.
Absolutely. And what I started seeing is that as I was digging into research as to what makes us age and what makes us thrive, what has come to play now is that we are greatly empowering technology, but nobody's really addressing empowering humanity to handle that technology at the same time.
Right.
And that gap is increasing every day. And that's where I said, it's no longer about just addressing how we age and addressing longevity, but how we address and how we grow with technology in a responsible way is going to be the key player.
Right.
And to answer your question, I would say when we look at AI applications in medicine, close to 70% of them are in radiology. And I'm at a location at my hospital we are one of the forefronts of AI products that are being tested in radiology. As I said, 70% are in radiology.
Right.
Within that 70%, we are at the forefront in testing some of the newest products. And so every day I use AI in a way, in different fashion. But at the same time, we're also beta testing a lot of models with radiology.
And is that because so much of radiology is studying and drawing conclusions from imagery? Is that where the AI fits into it?
That's an interesting question. And, there was a while back in 2016, 2017, when image recognition came out, there was all this talk that radiologists would be absolutely obsolete.
Yeah, it's been going on for years.
Right. But the exact reverse has happened, right? We actually right now have a shortage of radiologists, And I think the big idea here is that we have to change the framework from, I say, pixels to people.
Right.
Because it's really not that image recognition that we're really after, but it's just that if we can automate all those routine tasks that keep me from interpreting the images properly in the context of what makes most sense for that person.
Right.
So in terms of report generation, in terms of searching the chart for certain data, and all that, in terms of archiving and things like that.
Right.
If all of that can be automated, I can actually be more of
productive.
a human radiologist
Right.
and really spend time doing what I'm really good at.
Right.
And so the greatest benefit we're seeing is in those areas. So usually, that original fear was that all the interpretation will be done by machines, right?
Yep.
But it's actually the exact opposite. We are sort of automating all those routine tasks so I can get more time to do my interpretation.
So where are you seeing the AI products? You're seeing them purely on the imaging side, or are you seeing, because when I saw the breakdown of where your time is spent, like 35%, if I remember, is spent just on reading images, but the rest of it is people stuff. And then are the AI tools actually tackling that component, that 65%?
So they're tackling both sides. I would say the people side or the data side has been more successful.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. So when I dictate a report,
Right.
after I dictated my report, I've spent time looking at the images and everything like that, I have to do an impression, right? So when I do an impression, I have to literally read my whole report again, take the key findings and summarize it. And that creates my impression. And so when, let's say you're a neurologist, you get my report, you read the impression, and that's really the takeaway. And then you say, oh, this is abnormal. Let me go back to the body of the report and find the pertinent details. Well, that impression part, right? So we have a software right now, which I say generate impression, and it reads my report, and it generates the impression in my style. So it has studied, the AI has studied all my previous reports. It knows what I like to summarize. It understands my style and just gives me the impression. When we did the analysis on that, that saves us radiologists between anywhere from 15 to 20% of our time.
Oh, wow.
Just that one application, right? Think about that. So when you extrapolate that, right, that's 15 to 20% more time I have to spend on actually interpreting and really thinking about how can we impact the health of this patient.
So let me ask another question, because I think a lot out there, they're enamored by AI tools, but they're not seeing the return on those tools. Now, because you have these tools and they're saving you time, presumably, do you have more capacity, and are you seeing more patients?
I would say from the data side, and we are. From the imaging side, that in terms of image detection, there is still a lot of work because, for example, one of the things I do is we study scans and we look for brain aneurysms. Aneurysms are little sort of, I would say, protuberances or bubbles in the vessels, so which, if they rupture, you get brain hemorrhage and a lot of clinical consequences from that. So there is a AI tool that we were asked to test out that picks up aneurysms. We ran the data, and it was interesting. It would pick up random things, and all it would say is that aneurysm detected, but it would not tell us where. So it was a total nightmare.
Actually made it
so
worse.
it said, oh, aneurysm detected, but where, you know?
Right.
Oh,
And the actually the sad part was that in one patient, it actually we weren't supposed to give that output out to the patient. It wasn't supposed to go in the chart.
Oh, the patient got it.
On one of the patients, it actually the output went where they got it was a normal report,
Right.
but then the AI generated that aneurysm
false
detected
positive.
a false positive, and the patient complained and said, "Well,
Understandable.
the AI said it's aneurysm detected, and your radiologist said it's normal." So now we were in
Now you
we
have to
were
go
in the
back and
bind. We got
forth
to
on it, of course.
go back and explain that. So long story short, the imaging aspects still needs a lot of work because every patient is different.
Right,
You know,
of
some
course.
the data set that is fed into training that model
It's a standard data set,
It's
isn't it?
usually very standardized.
Yeah, I know.
Right? But when you take that learned model, put it
Right.
in a hospital system where there is a different scanner, different types of artifacts.
Everything is different,
Everything
yeah.
is different.
Right.
Then it gets lost. It's picking up these. So there's so many
Right.
false positives, as you mentioned.
Right.
And that's why we have to sit and say, okay, it's identifying X, Y, Z, but none of these make sense.
Right.
That's why you need a radiologist to really make the call. And
That
Right,
real world data and the real world setting is really interesting. This is not at all related, but I was talking once to a researcher who'd been working on a fast food ordering system for the drive-through, and they spent many months testing all the permutations of the ways people might order their menu items and really fine-tuning this AI model to figure out what someone is trying to order. Then they rolled it out into the first test stores, and it utterly failed because they weren't counting on the fact that people would pull up with a car full of screaming kids, or with a radio on and a news show talking on the radio, or even a commercial that mentioned food playing on the radio while the person's trying to order their food, and cars honking in the background, etc. So it's an interesting reminder that like the real world implementation of AI models is often far messier than that nice curated training data might lead the model to believe.
correct.
Now, even the models that you're testing, and I read something, you had sent us an article, there are 700 AI applications in radiology alone. And one of the pieces of information I got from the article was very specific models work on very specific, like just aneurysms, for instance. And a different problem requires something else. So it's not like you have a model that just scans for everything. You have a whole bunch of different models.
Correct. I mean, there are 700 FDA-approved models
is
at that
mind-boggling.
time of that article. I mean, there are probably more,
probably
which
more now, yeah.
is just boggles my mind that there are even that many, right?
Yeah.
And but they're trying to apply like very specific use cases.
Right.
One is sort of, for example, lung nodule detection. And I guess one thing that I would say in favor of AI, I would say where is it working? And I'll give you a couple of examples, okay? Just so people have a little more context. I don't want to say that all AI image detection is bad. Right. Where is it working?
Right.
So one use case where we use it and it works successfully is we do this study. It's called NeuroQuant. NeuroQuant is when people have issues with memory loss, and the neurologist does the initial cognitive testing, finds out that that this person does have issues with memory, where let's do further testing. So there's NeuroQuant is an AI-based tool which does a volumetric scan, which means it does a brain MRI, and it's done with really thin cuts where we can figure out the volume of certain parts of your brain. And we know that certain parts of your brain have to do with memory. Particularly, there's an area called the hippocampus. You may have heard of that. The hippocampal formation is where your memory resides, right?
Yep.
So what we can do is we can get a volume of the person's hippocampus, and then it tells us that where does that person's volume stand in terms of the population of the norm for that age. Is it smaller, larger, right? So it gives us that statistics. But also when we follow that person 6 months later, 12 months later, it tells us, is that volume diminishing
over time,
over 6 months, over 12 months? But that change is to a human eye is imperceptible.
Right, of course.
If I looked at it,
you would never notice it.
I would never notice it. And there's no way I could measure it, because my measurements would be three plane measurements. It would never be a full volumetric measurement, which AI would do. So that has been a phenomenal tool where we can pick up these subtle changes in volume. And when we see a precipitous change, we can say, okay, this is serious, that this patient does have decline in brain volume then faster than they should, and let's be really proactive about this. So that has been fantastic. In fact, we had recently a woman in her mid-40s started forgetting where she put her keys and started forgetting names and all that. And then people said, is this real or not? And we did the scan, followed her up, and she had the actually decline that was substantial.
Wow.
And so then she went into more sort of rigorous kind of regimen to deal with that.
Right.
Okay. So that's one area. Another area is for example lung nodules. Okay. Which some of the lung nodules, the change from let's say I say here's a lung nodule, I'm not sure what it is. Come back in 3 months. Well, in 3 months, my eye will say, well, it looks about the same, right? But the AI will be like, no, it's actually increased by 7%. Oh, okay. Well, then we do another follow-up. And so it can pick up these subtle changes. So in that case, in those use cases, it's extremely helpful.
Very interesting. And I like what I like about these examples and your overall narrative of this is it's not a situation where AI is coming in and taking you, the human, out of the loop. It's actually giving you better tools, giving you better information to make your own decisions, your conclusions, your recommendations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tell people this. I said, AI will not replace radiologists, but radiologists using AI will replace other radiologists.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that.
Because that empowerment with having these tools is phenomenal.
Well, you bring up a good point. Are you seeing trepidation amongst other radiologists to using these tools and pushback? And now I'll ask the question, is some of it generational? I'll put that as nicely as I possibly can.
There.
Hey, we're part of that generation. We're allowed to.
Okay. I would say yes and no. And it really depends on really the psyche of the person.
Right.
And I would say some people are those early adopters where they'll just say, you know what, this is a great tool. And I guess I fall into that category. I said, hey, this is great. Let's test it. If it works. So I use the report generation tool. I use all of these sort of volumetric measurements and whatnot. And I said, if it helps me, it makes my life easier. It makes me more accurate. Let's go with it. Okay. Right. Some of the groups, and I would say we are the type of group that we are very forward-looking. Mm-hmm. We beta test everything. We welcome AI because we know that it makes us. It empowers us. It's not taking anything away. But I would say there are radiologists that are on the other side of the fence that are scared. They think it's a slippery slope.
Of course.
That they say that once we let AI in at this level, it will then sort of creep up and and start replacing other things.
Right.
But what I'm seeing is that I train residents too. Mm-hmm. And the way we train them is we're training them to be empowered using these tools.
Right.
And when those radiologists come out, this is going to be a norm. They're just going to be empowered radiologists.
Right. I actually think it's going to create more opportunity for individuals if they're trained properly in AI. And they know how to use these tools properly, and subsequently will probably create a lot more demand, not less.
Oh, absolutely. And I said, with that example of that volumetric tool for the brain, if we didn't have AI, we couldn't even do that study because I can't take those measurements. AI can. So now here's an application where it's using AI. Now I have to put it in context and I have to communicate with the neurologist. I have to humanize it, and make it relevant. But it's only because of AI does that tool exist.
Right. So you described yourself, you self-identified as an early adopter, and I think that's an interesting angle because my father, for example, was an attorney, and his whole life he was an early adopter of technology and looking for how to apply it to his business. So I actually believe that being an early adopter is somewhat of a mindset. It's not generational. It doesn't matter your age. It's really what your approach is to this. But it's also funny because I was always an early adopter, and I've probably wasted so much time and money on gadgets and tools and things trying them out because I'm perpetually optimistic that one of them is going to be the thing that saves me a few hours a week or a few hours a day. What's fascinating to me is I think we, as a society, we've been thinking about early adopters as sort of like slightly overly optimistic, maybe a little bit goofy, like, oh, that guy's an early adopter, right? Yeah, and it's almost not a badge of honor sometimes, right? But yet in AI, I think what we're seeing is the people who are early adopters in any field are the ones who are sort of courageously just trying things. They're experimenting. They're looking for ways to use AI to help them do their jobs.
Right.
And they're the ones who are sort of leading the revolution, like figuring out new ways to apply it. So I think it's really interesting. And I like your point about the younger residents that you're training. This will be second nature to them, right? They'll be brought up with these tools.
Yeah.
A different question. Do you have the organizational support for what you do and being able to adopt things this way? Because in a lot of institutions, corporate or otherwise, there's that pushback at the top. I don't want them to adopt these tools, or there's that reluctance to adopt these tools. It's, let's put a moat around the, what we have today because we want to protect the way things are going today. We don't want to kill the golden goose. Yeah, a million different reasons.
Yes.
Do you get that level of support to do the things that you do? Because it's time consuming. You could argue it's risky. Yes, I all know in the end it's going to be highly beneficial to the organization. But do they give you the support that's necessary? Well, obviously they do, but
I would say I'm at the St. Luke's hospital system. Sort of the hub is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Yeah. And their mindset has been is let's test and try all these tools because that's the future.
Right.
And there's no hiding from it. So we might as well be proactive.
Right.
Less beta tests. Let's put in these tools. Are all of them going to work? Of course not, right? Are some of them going to fail? Some of them are going to be waste of time and and whatnot. But in that process, like the ones that I talked about, we will find some gems, which when we do, it's going to be a huge asset. Right.
Right. I think you'll find gems, but you're also developing a lot of institutional knowledge about how to use these tools going forward. So, and that just takes a long time to develop. And you have the benefit of doing all this up front, going through the trials and tribulations of testing all these different products, but you're building up a lot of institutional knowledge in the process.
Right.
Which another institution late to the game is going to have to do on their own, and that's just going to take a lot longer.
And I think to your point, one of the from an institutional point of view, sometimes institutions look at AI in terms of a liability risk,
right?
And they said that because if we implement an AI tool and it screws up or it's the problem with the algorithm, then systematically it's going to have this error that's going to, and then who's liable now?
I was actually going to ask you about that because as you're saying that the institution does a lot of testing of these tools, how do you handle whether you call it responsible AI or AI safety? Like, how do you manage those risks?
And so that's why us as radiologists, we are there, and there is nothing that the AI is making a decision on independently. Put it that way,
right?
Okay, so that we are there as sort of the firewall, and where whenever a decision is made, it's actually going through a human, and we're making the judgment call that is this making sense, and do we use this data or do we use this output, sort of which is very, very, very important, which is very important.
Human in the loop.
Right. You need that, and I think that's where that liability aspect comes in, right?
Right.
What do you think about disclosure of how AI is used to patients in this case? I mean, do you think that they should be informed of how it's used? Do you think it's just another tool and it's not particularly relevant to them? Or how do you think about that issue?
It's interesting because I was looking at some of the liability contracts and the malpractice contracts, and a lot of them explicitly state that they will only cover imaging studies and whatnot that have been approved and been through a board-certified radiologist, but that any sort of AI interpreted scan, they are not liable for. But we can use it as a tool and then still make our final report. But it has to be a radiologist that signs off on it.
Do you think that'll change? I almost feel like it has to change.
I think at some point it will change. From an image interpretation point of view, we are not there yet because, and I think, Peter, what the issue is, and I tell people is this, when if you look at we talk about like different human emotions, right? And let me ask you a question. So, what do you think is the lowest human emotion?
The lowest human emotion. Oh God, I have no idea. Can't even think of anything. Fear? No.
Close. So and this was something new to me, and I said, the lowest human emotion is, and I thought it was fear, and I said anger when I first somebody asked me this question. I thought it was anger. The lowest human emotion is actually apathy.
I would have not even thought that. That would have never.
And it's interesting. So if you look at like concentration camps, or if you look at like like those where situations are very dire,
right?
When people were tortured and everything like that, at the end of the day, the lowest low was when they had no reaction.
Yeah.
It is apathy. They don't have fear. They don't have anger. It's apathy. Right. And what I tell people is that AI operates at apathy. It has no emotion.
Right.
Right. So when you look at AI, it's apathetic. It really is unemotional. Right.
Right.
And so as a human, when let's say I got a mammogram, just instinctually, I don't want a apathetic system to be giving me a diagnosis, because there is no emotion there.
Nothing there.
And so that's going to take time for people to develop that trust. You know what I'm saying?
And it's interesting because that apathy is simultaneously, I'm guessing, both the greatest strength and weakness of these systems, right? Like they are not subject to the vagaries of human emotion-driven decisions and biases, but yet they also can't account for human needs and nuance.
And it's interesting, even though like AI could read as, let's say, a scan perfectly.
Right.
It's interesting when you take a poll, people actually still will prefer a human that is imperfect, because they have that emotion, because they feel like somebody still cares. Behind that, those scans is a set of eyes that does care,
right? Of course.
Rather than just having apathy.
That makes sense.
It's kind of like that John Legend song. All of me. He goes. There's a line in there. The line in there is like, I love your perfect imperfections, and it's sort of like that, right? Like where you actually want that imperfection.
You want a human at the end. You want a human. You want a human. Is that emotional connection that you want, and that's a human. That's why I think AGI is honestly never going to be real, because you can never encode that into a model.
But I think it's also interesting that humans, to your point, even when they don't get the outcome they want, they accept the outcome more from a human than from a machine. There was a study I read, they were talking about using AI-powered chatbots for customer service. And humans generally were very resistant to the idea. If they had a request, they want a problem to be solved. And if the chatbot came back and said something to the effect of, I'm sorry, we can't help you, or your request has been denied, we're not going to give you this full refund, or whatever it was, they always wanted to talk to a human. And even in cases when the human reaffirmed the decision of the chatbot, but did it with sort of some empathy. They said, well, I'm very sorry, Mr. Smith, but I wish I could help you. I understand your frustration, but I'm just not able to do this. It was easier to take for the people. So, even when the outcome is the same, it sort of felt better being rejected by a person than being rejected by an apathetic machine in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, like if you look at text generation and whatnot, and when people actually prefer responses that are imperfect now, than a perfectly templated response
from a model.
Because they said, a real person wrote this, and so I think almost people have this hunger now for imperfection, because that means that there is that sense of reality, humanity, authenticity, associated with that,
So my new AI model is going to start sprinkling some spelling errors and some
exactly.
mistakes.
Well, I heard they got rid of the M dash. Then they got rid of it. They dialed it down. They dialed it way down.
You can opt out of the M dash, but if they ever take away the Oxford comma, we're going.
No. We're going to go crazy if that actually happens. But the M dash being diminished is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Though I overuse it anyway. But hey.
Really interesting. So let's talk then a little bit. We've sort of started to touch on this topic of humans and AI, and kind of what I think is it fair to say you would describe that as a potentially very symbiotic relationship between people who have a job to do and AI tools that they can use for that job?
I think the only way forward is pairing human intelligence with artificial intelligence.
Right.
Okay. And that hybrid is going to be the only way forward.
Right.
Okay. And we're going to, it's not just in radiology. I'm saying, you guys probably
it's
see
every
it.
place.
It's across the board.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're actually, there's going to be a shortage of people with that hybrid mindset. That's going to be the shortage, is that people who can actually empower both.
Right.
You know,
so what would you describe as like the key components of that hybrid mindset? Like, what do you look for?
So, it's interesting you asked that, and I interview residents, I interview radiologists and whatnot. And as we're a location where we implement all these AI products and everything like that.
Right.
But within that context, what I look for is that, yes, I'm not looking for the tech guy who can operate and understands technology, but I want the guy who has that sort of mastery mindset,
Right.
And can learn to master this hybrid model that we're creating.
Right.
And so when I look at candidates, and when I look at both from resident side and then the sort of from radiologist side, I want to see that in kind of from their experience, what have they done to show me some lineage, some mastery and whatnot, because that's the way forward, is that are you going to be able to kind of stick with this process and develop this model out, this hybrid model out successfully?
See, I think you're 100% correct. I also think those individuals are in a minority, which worries me going forward. And it is not going to be this, I think humans are inherently lazy to a large degree, and these tools are replacing cognitive capabilities. And I was seeing that today with a lot of the tools, especially with the younger generation, is they're checking their brains and they're using, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it may be to generate output, and they're just plopping on a piece of paper or the proverbial email, whatever they're doing, but they're not thinking anymore. They're not mastering.
But I also think that some of it is probably it's easy to say it's the younger generation, right? But
it's all generations.
We've in this country, at least over the last few decades, I feel like maybe we've been training people on the wrong things in their undergraduate education, from middle school on up through high school and university. We've got these various standards of learning and standardized tests in a lot of different states and some other levels of standardized testing. And so it feels like the emphasis has been teaching people facts as opposed to teaching them about curiosity and the tools to learn, the tools to research. We've got so much fact that you need to drill into people's heads that you're not teaching critical thinking skills. And that feels like we've almost been doing all the wrong things for 20 years to produce the kind of...
No, I agree. So it was interesting. This week, another article popped up, but it was a New Jersey university, which I think cut back on all the humanities programs. They're no longer going to give out humanities degrees.
Wow.
Which it was in a journal, I was reading, I'm like, this is the completely wrong way to go about doing this. And as an engineer, degree in engineering, a degree in math, clearly a very analytical person, I was shocked by this and horrified by this. And I thought this was the exact wrong thing to do, because those critical skills that you learn through evaluating and reading literature and history and understanding history and putting things in a greater context and being able to write eloquently and clearly and concisely and put thoughts down on paper, you're eliminating the programs that actually create that, which to me is the wrong way to go about this.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. And you take any career going forward, it's going to be those players that are going to drive things forward. It's not even just critical thinking. It's also all the aspects of when you talk about resilience, when we talk about agility, in the corporate corporate world, right? Where is all that coming from? It's just that ability to pivot, the ability to see things that others are not seeing, and to have that intuition. And it all comes from, when I tell people that if you don't have the skills for mastery, you will never have the skills for innovation, intuition, and
100%
whatnot.
agree. Yep.
Because it's only when you master something do you understand the nuance of it.
Yes.
That you could actually then, when there's a hiccup, you understand it enough
Right.
that now you can make that change. It's like let's say in my case, right?
Right.
I've read maybe little over 300,000 scans in my
Right.
let's say career, close to that. Okay, I think by the time I finish, I'll probably will read about 500,000 scans.
Wow.
Which is enormous amount of data, right?
enormous.
But what that gives me, and what makes me valuable to as a instructor in radiology, is that it's that I know the nuance of each thing. It's not just that it's a brain bleed, but it's what type of bleed is it, how significant it is. Because I've seen all the variations of it over a course of time, that when I look at it, it's that experience that gives me value. And when I'm teaching residents who maybe have seen 12 scans, right, and they're trying to make a decision based on that, I can give them the context, and I can say that here's the things that you need to be aware of. Here's what, and so when we're testing tools, right? One of the tools we tested was picking up intracranial hemorrhage, right? Since I have that, I would say mastery in a sense, right? It's probably that 10,000 hour rule. I think I've surpassed that.
I'm way past that.
I easily surpassed that, right? But since I have that, I can see when AI picks up something, I can find 10 different things that it missed, because I had that experience. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
of course.
So it's going to require. That's why I'm saying the innovation will only come from mastery.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think what I find troubling in the market is we're getting rid of all the junior employees and their IE can be replaced by AI, which I think is foolish, because I think you're right. It is that mastery that's absolutely necessary.
And I think that we need to implement a mechanism to develop masters in our organization. And I think that's the key driver is that you got to, and even so with my residents, I tell them the same thing. I said, look, your goal is you want to be fast, and I said you can use all these tools to be fast, but it's all about being good and accurate and fast. But to be good, it's going to require you to look at more scans, and we want to be productive at the same time and be accurate at the same time. So you got to work on this mastery piece. So every time I said just read, and I'll guide you, and I'll tell you what you missed and all that. But you reset, do it again, reset, do it again. Get the reps in so that you start.
It's like a muscle.
You start clocking. That you start on that 10,000 hour journey now.
It's no different than training. It's a muscle. You got to use it.
And I think it is a muscle, and that's actually a great segue too to sort of what I think of as like the physical aspect of this, right? Because we can train people to have critical thinking skills. We can train them, give them the tools to develop their own mastery in a field. But I think part of what you and I've discussed briefly is that it's also you have to take care of the whole person, right? There's a physical component of it. There's a health component. There's what would you say is the ultimate human that can collaborate with and partner with AI? Is it someone who's intelligent, has critical thinking skills, and is physically healthy and is emotionally healthy? How do you think about all these things that need to be in the mix?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot I can say to that, but briefly, that's why the whole book is on that. There you go. So the big picture here is physiology equals psychology.
Right.
Okay. If your physiology is off, you will never have the psychology to handle all these things we're talking about, right? We talk about what we just talked about: mastery, intuition, innovation, all that. Which that to have that level of psychology, your physiology has to be there first. And what I mean by that is this: is that in this day and age, if you look at the way people are aligned with, let's say, the circadian rhythm, or in terms of how people sleep,
Right.
how people engage with technology late into the night and whatnot, right? It's that we've forgotten those primal connections, and we don't realize that ultimately, if you're not sleeping right, the next day, they said that if you're sleep deprived, you're just as bad as like somebody driving drunk.
Yes, I read that too.
Have
Yes.
you read that
Yeah,
article?
I read the same thing.
Have you read that
In fact,
article?
I think it might be worse.
Yeah, it may be worse.
Yeah.
So they said that, would you accept, if you sat on a plane, would you accept your pilot to be drunk? And most people say, absolutely
Of course
not.
not.
But did you check if the pilot slept well the night before or not?
No.
One of the studies, in fact, the takeaway from was that, when you go for surgery and the surgeon comes to, say hello to you, they said the question you should ask the surgeon is, how well did they sleep the night before?
Oh, interesting.
Because if he did not sleep, they said you should almost postpone the surgery.
I'll be back.
Because
It's a great point, though. Let me ask you a question. Do the hospitals account for that? Like when the cardiologist comes in and he's going to go do open heart surgery, they'd ask him, by the way, Doctor such and such, did you sleep 8 hours last night before you go perform this open heart surgery?
I don't think that is that.
Given that it causes, I mean, look, errors in medicine are so
absolutely,
high.
absolutely.
Why not account for something as
It's
basic as
interesting.
that?
Airline pilots and truck drivers.
And I said, shouldn't there be a check-in? Shouldn't there be
Right.
and now that we have all these AI tools, right? Shouldn't there be a mechanism to say, hey, look, what did your tracker say?
Right.
If you slept less than 6 hours, you're not capable to perform surgery today or fly this plane.
Right.
I would think that would be.
Well, that would fix a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I'm not saying fix problems. It would certainly adjust behaviors very quickly.
I guess that raises a question of like privacy issues where that's my personal life, but
But you're opening up my heart. I'm sorry,
Right.
but I would like to know that you're well equipped and you had a good night's rest before you start doing this.
And it is interesting because over-the-road truckers as well as airline pilots have mandatory rest periods, and there are
the
federal
requirements.
for that. I want to go back though to this concept of your physiological health, and that affects other things. Because a lot of companies, a lot of workplaces are notoriously bad at looking after their employees' physical well-being, right? They may be in unhealthy workplaces, they may have bad ergonomics, they may be sleep deprived, they may be, not given enough time to deal with other life issues, and, it's the grind, right? Do you think that is going to have to change if companies want to have these high-performing people who can be sort of effective collaborators with AI? Are they going to be forced to look after their employees' health in different ways than they do today?
I think it's going to be a must.
Yeah.
I can tell you, in the past few months, looking at physicians, I know one physician who had a heart attack while he was doing a orbital procedure.
Oh.
They had to. It was just luckily the patient did okay. Someone I know very close. We had another physician who had a massive heart attack overnight, passed away. Another physician who had issues with the child and whatnot, and actually it was a suicide. He couldn't handle the emotional pressure and everything like that,
Right.
and it was a suicide. And these are physicians. These are high functioning individuals. I mean, we're not even talking about corporate. We're talking about people who understand health, who understand sleeping and everything like that. But think about it, right? And this is literally in the past few months. Okay,
Right.
there was and people, even with handling divorce, handling life situations and things like that, and I tell one of the things is, look, people sleep for 8 hours. People come and give you their time at work for 8 hours,
Right.
and then there's that 8 hours at home, but you have to sort of be cognizant of that 8 hours at home and make sure that is being implemented properly, and that do people need support. And I think as employees, we have to pay attention to that, because that 8 hours at home and then that 8 hours of sleep, is determining that those 8 hours at work, and you have to pay attention to that.
Right.
You don't want, like you said, we don't want drunk people working for you. You know?
Right, of course.
Right, and if we're going to have people be the absolute arbiters of the outcomes of AI-driven processes, right? Whether it's a radiologist reviewing AI generated findings, or whether it's someone deciding on a loan application or a legal outcome or whatever it is, right? These are important things that affect people's lives. We are going to require, I think, those people to be at their peak performance level, right? Like, we already see in a lot of corporate settings that there's this insidious problem of over-reliance on models, where people tend to start to, over time, defer to the findings of the model and be less and less willing to exercise their own judgment, especially if it contradicts what the model has as an output, right? So we can't let that happen, but that means we're going to have people who are physically able and mentally and emotionally able to really be at the top of their game, because we're sort of saying to people, in some cases, you are the last line of defense between a potentially flawed AI-generated outcome and the right outcome.
Right, and I think one of to your point is that, let's say we optimize the system so that now we need less players in the mix, right? Which is kind of what a lot of companies are doing. Maybe too much of that.
I did that wrong, but that's a whole nother.
Right. But let's say there is some sort of cost savings in terms of workforce, and you kind of contract, and like now you have an efficient system. I'm just saying, let's assume that's the case, right? But the balance that you're left with, actually now you play much more of a critical role.
Yeah.
And because now you are a steward of this whole system, that if you're not kind of operating it properly, it could lead to, before maybe you just had this little role, and if you screwed up, maybe it was okay. Big deal. But now let's say we contracted down, and now these players are running all this kind of like agentic model.
Right.
Now that person even becomes more critical.
Yes.
And so that's where this aspect of that physiology is going to really play a big role.
Absolutely. And the other thing, and we've talked about this a couple of times before too, is there's also this scaling or speed factor that doesn't play always in our favor, which is that if a human being sort of misses something in AI, if I'm a human supervising another human, and that human is doing bad work, making mistakes, there's a natural limit to how much damage that person can do, because I might be asleep at the wheel, but they're human, and they might only process 20 bad loan decisions in a week, right? So my damage radius is 20 bad loan decisions that got made this week, and I was asleep at the wheel. If that human is overseeing and supervising an AI-driven process, right, the machine will always be faster than the human. That AI-driven loan process could make 2,000 or 20,000 bad loan decisions in a day, right? So the immediacy of the negative impact is just magnified by the speed and the scalability of AI solutions, that human has to be able to be effective and on top of things to prevent these bad outcomes.
Absolutely. So we're gonna need humans that are much more on point as we go forward, for sure.
Right.
So let's talk then a little bit about the future, right? I think we've talked about the concept that we need humans to be sort of at their peak, and we need companies to understand the importance of having those humans at their peak. What about on the AI side? Like, is there anything that you're particularly excited about or trepidatious about that you see on the near horizon? Like, what do you see coming down the pike?
I think that all these tools that I talked about are all exciting, and it's going to continue to escalate. But what I'm excited about is that when AI allows me to be more human, that's what excites me. I can spend if I spend, let's say, 5 minutes searching the chart for information, and if I can automate that and it gives me that answer, then I can take the saved time and talk to the clinician without being rushed. I can talk to him. We can have a more humane conversation. And I would say, even as radiologists, we are sometimes sort of like the glue because we interact with every
Everybody.
subspecialty, right? I'm talking to the neurosurgeon, I'm talking to the oncologist, I'm talking to the radiation therapy person, nursing staff, we're talking to the technologists and everything like that. And so, and all of those interactions take time, right? And I want to, as a sort of having that kind of like that high EQ, I want to make those deposits, right? But sometimes it's just that if all my time is taken away by all this routine stuff, it doesn't give me that time. And so what I'm excited about is getting that time back to be really more human.
And what resonates with me about what you said is how you use that time you get back, because you're using it to improve quality, not quantity, right? You're not saying, if I could get 3 hours back, I could do X% more scans, right? You're already reading enough scans. It's really, you could use that found time to improve the quality of the job you do, the quality of your ability to interact with these other clinicians, et cetera. And I think that's a lesson for a lot of corporations who are looking to say, okay, can we just hire X% less people next year?
And they're looking
it's really, can we take these people and allow them to do a more fulfilling and a better job and to be more effective at what they're doing and happier at what they're doing? But we're fixated too much in industry on
cost savings and optimization and saving money and generating more money, and I think that's what they fixate on. But I think you're absolutely correct.
And if you apply this to corporate, right? If you can automate some of those routine things that you spend time on, you have time to develop those relationships. Let's say you're a middle level manager or whatnot, you can go in and actually have lunch with the key players and actually develop that is going to actually be a much bigger deposit going forward than really actually that automation, honestly. You know what I'm saying? And the other point you made, which I think is fantastic, is that with this savings in time, what are you doing with that time?
Right.
And I think, a lot of and I'm just talking about from a consumer point of view, okay? People using this AI technology right now. Let's say you automated some tasks. Now you got 15 minutes back, 20 minutes back, right? What most people do is take that time savings and do more technology.
Well, do more work.
Do more work.
Yeah,
do more
they don't
on social media, or do more digital. And I say that if you got that time back, actually do things that are empowering you as a human. Do things that technology doesn't allow you to do.
Right.
And suddenly the idea of a shorter work week sounds less frivolous and wasteful if you think about it as, if I can do the amount of tasks in X% less time, and I can take that saved time and invest it in doing things that make me smarter, healthier, or just better performing, that's not Jetsons-esque. That's not, I'm going to take that time and play astro golf or relax on the moon. I'm actually going to put it to a very productive use. And, and that's I think to me is a much more compelling way to think about how we would benefit from all this.
I think, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing sort of three types of people going forward. Okay. We have this one camp where people say, I'm going to stay analog, and you cannot move me, and I'm just going to stay. I'm just going to stay away from this AI thing, and you can't budge. Okay, and that's fine.
Right.
Okay, they will never see the benefits of what AI can do for you. And then there's the second generation, which are embracing. They want to be all digital. They love everything digital.
Yep.
Everything about this. They want all digital.
Yep.
But they don't see the advantage of the AI or the digital aspect in their kind of humanity.
Right.
Okay, and then there's the third player who says that yes, AI gives me the opportunity to be more human. So I'm going to take all this routine stuff that I don't like doing, give it to AI, take that time and put that into all those things that make me more human.
Right.
Invest it in your analog life.
Right.
Invest it in
Invest
your
in yourself, in your
invest it in
relationships,
yourself,
and
investing in all those human capabilities that ultimately is going to make you a better person, and it's just going to give you more success. You know,
AI might mean eventually I have enough time to become a good guitar player instead of a bad guitar player.
That's debatable, but
there might be some other limitations at play there. Not just time. Fair enough. This has been a really, really interesting conversation. Kavin, thank you so much. We do have a couple of other really important questions for you. The question we like to ask everybody is, especially since you are out there seeing so much going on in the world with AI, is there anything that jumps out at you that, a favorite tool you've used lately, or a favorite technique, or a favorite approach to AI that sticks with you or interests you that you could share with people?
Sure, many, but I would say one that really stood out recently. I was using this. It's an application called Gamma, and
we love Gamma.
And I could take some notes, just drop it in Gamma, and it generates this presentation in literally like seconds, you know, and it would also fill in the gaps. So I may have an incomplete thought, and it will like fill in. And I thought it was such a fantastic tool. What would take me all this time in developing animations and things like that. It develops graphs and this and that, and fantastic. So.
And it's a great example of your point, which is you spend your time thinking about the content now, and not the format and the pictures and the color schemes, because it's just handling all that for you too.
Yes. And it's buying my life back. Really, it's buying my life back.
Yeah, no, it saves a ton of time.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you bought enough time to therefore come and spend some of it with us. Thank you. It's been fantastic.
No, this has been an excellent conversation. I can't thank you enough for coming out to our studio in the city.
Yes. Pleasure being with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. And great conversation.
I would say the path forward is AI plus PI or primal intelligence.
Yes.
That's the only way forward.
I think it's
correct. Yep.
Sign me up. All right. And I think that's it for this episode of Call Me Data. Please remember, as we announced earlier, that we are going to be having a Ask Me Anything episode at the end of the year. So if you have questions you want us to tackle, things that you've always wondered about, or things upon which you just want our opinions, please email those to us or put them on some of the comment sections wherever you watch this podcast. You can email them to us at podcast@allinondata.com, and we will do our best to answer your questions.
Yes.
Peter, until next time, always a
Call Me Data. It's always a pleasure. Another great conversation.
Mistry,
pleasure.
Thank you again.
Thank you again.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Call Me Data. If you enjoyed our podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us on YouTube. And make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.